Think Texas real estate is booming? Not anymore. Behind the cowboy hats and barbecue joints, 10 Texas cities are heading straight for a housing crash that could wipe out thousands of homeowners' dreams and savings. Listings just hit 123,000 in April 2025, 53% higher than normal, and prices are now dropping across the state. Your dream home could turn into a financial nightmare faster than you think. Stick around as we count down the 10 Texas cities where the housing market is cracking wide open. This isn't just a dip, it's a full-on correction that could flip the Lone Star State upside down. And if you thought Austin was immune to housing crashes, think again. Austin was once the poster child for pandemic-era real estate success, where tech workers fleeing California drove home prices to astronomical heights. But in 2020, this once booming tech capital is experiencing one of the most dramatic housing corrections in America. Austin has seen a 20.4% fall in home values from peak pandemic highs, making it the biggest metro-level correction in America in that time span. The numbers tell a sobering story. ReVenture gave Austin a home price score of just 34 out of 100, signaling severe overvaluation and imminent decline. What was once a seller's paradise has transformed into a buyer's market faster than anyone anticipated. Unless a drastic shift happens, Austin's home price growth is likely to decline more in 2025, making it a complete buyer's market. The tech migration that fueled Austin's boom has largely dried up. Companies that once relocated entire teams to Texas are now implementing hiring freezes and layoffs. Meanwhile, builders who went wild during the pandemic frenzy are left with massive oversupply. Homes that sold for $700,000 in 2022 are now struggling to attract offers at $550,000. The human cost is real. Tech workers who bought at the peak are now underwater on their mortgages, trapped in homes worth significantly less than what they paid. Recent graduates with Austin job offers are reconsidering, knowing their salaries won't stretch to cover inflated housing costs. But Austin isn't the only Texas tech hub feeling the pressure. The Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is facing its own reckoning. The Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex was supposed to be different. As Texas's economic powerhouse, with Fortune 500 companies and steady job growth, DFW seemed insulated from housing market chaos. But even economic strength can't overcome the fundamental forces now crushing this massive metro area. In March, single-family homes in Dallas sold for less than the asking price by 10.1%, one of the largest gaps among the 50 markets analyzed nationwide. That's not just a negotiation discount, it's a clear signal that sellers are desperate and buyers hold all the cards. Dallas experienced the highest year-over-year inventory spike of the three other major Texas metros, topping out at 189.7% in April 2023. The corporate relocation boom that drove DFW's growth for years has stalled. Companies that once rushed to relocate from California and New York are now pausing expansion plans as economic uncertainty grows. Meanwhile, suburban developers who built entire neighborhoods expecting continued migration are left with streets full of for sale signs. Frisco, Plano, and McKinney, once the crown jewels of DFW growth, are seeing homes sit for months. Families who moved here for job opportunities are finding their home values dropping while property taxes continue climbing. The math no longer works for many residents caught between declining equity and rising costs. Even corporate executives who relocated to lead major company moves are quietly listing their homes, some at losses approaching six figures. While Dallas struggles with oversupply, Houston faces a different set of challenges tied to the volatile energy sector that has always defined the city's economic pulse. Houston's housing market has always danced to the rhythm of oil prices, and right now that music has turned ominous. Oil prices are down to $57 per barrel, a level that's problematic for Texas's economy as many local operators shut down production when oil gets that cheap. This creates a devastating knock-on effect on local employment and home prices throughout America's energy capital. The numbers reveal Houston's vulnerability. Single-family homes sold for less than the asking price by 4.4% in March, while energy sector layoffs ripple through neighborhoods from Katy to the Woodlands. When oil companies cut jobs, it doesn't just affect roughnecks and engineers. It impacts everyone from mortgage brokers to restaurant workers, who depend on energy, money flowing through the local economy. Hurricane Beryl's aftermath initially masked the underlying weakness, but recovery efforts couldn't hide the fundamental problem. Energy companies are consolidating operations, moving jobs to lower-cost states, and scaling back Houston area investments. Refineries along the ship channel are reducing capacity, and petrochemical plants are delaying expansion projects. For homeowners, this translates to real financial pain. Families who bought homes in master-planned communities like Cinco Ranch and Bridgeland are watching their equity evaporate as energy sector uncertainty spreads. Many petroleum engineers and geologists who relocated here during the shale boom are now considering moves to Denver or Oklahoma City, where opportunities remain stronger. The ripple effects extend beyond energy workers to every corner of Houston's economy. San Antonio, meanwhile, faces its own unique set of pressures as a military-dependent economy. San Antonio's military heritage and affordable charm once made it a reliable housing market, but even the Alamo City can't defend against the forces crushing Texas real estate. Homes in San Antonio sold for 10.5% less than the asking price in March, the largest discount gap among the 50 markets analyzed nationwide. That's a clear signal that buyers are walking away from overpriced properties faster than you can say, "Remember the Riverwalk." The military economy that anchors San Antonio is undergoing massive restructuring. Base consolidations and defense budget cuts are reducing the steady flow of military families who traditionally drove housing demand. When Joint Base San Antonio announced personnel reductions, it wasn't just soldiers who felt the impact. Local real estate agents, mortgage brokers, and home builders all saw their business dry up. Tourism, the city's other economic pillar, hasn't recovered to pre-pandemic levels. Fewer conventions mean fewer hotel bookings, restaurant visits, and the spillover economic activity that supports local wages. Meanwhile, population growth continues, but job creation lags behind, creating an affordability crisis even with lower median home prices compared to Austin or Dallas. Military families stationed here face a particularly painful situation. Many bought homes expecting steady appreciation, but now face potential reassignments to locations where their San Antonio properties won't sell for what they owe. First-time homebuyers, including young military couples, are discovering that even affordable San Antonio has priced them out of homeownership. Beyond the major metros, smaller Texas cities face even steeper declines as economic pressures intensify in communities with fewer resources to weather the storm. The Permian Basin's twin cities of Odessa and Midland represent ground zero for Texas's energy-driven housing collapse. Permian Basin cities like Odessa and Midland face the possibility of experiencing a decline in home prices over the next year. But calling it a mere decline understates the severity of what's unfolding in America's most productive oil region. These cities experienced a speculative frenzy during the shale boom that makes other Texas markets look conservative. The Permian Basin's twin cities of Odessa and Midland represent ground zero for Texas's energy-driven housing collapse. Permian Basin cities like Odessa and Midland face the possibility of experiencing a decline in home prices over the next year. But calling it a mere decline understates the severity of what's unfolding in America's most productive oil region. These cities experienced a speculative frenzy during the shale boom that makes other Texas markets look conservative. Homes that sold for $120,000 in 2018 peaked at over $400,000 by 2022. Oil field workers making six-figure salaries bid against each other for basic ranch homes, driving prices to levels that defied all economic logic. Now the bubble is bursting with devastating force. Shale production cuts have triggered a sea of layoffs across drilling companies, pipeline operators, and service contractors. When Chevron announced workforce reductions and ConocoPhillips scaled back Permian operations, entire neighborhoods went from boom to ghost town overnight. The human toll is severe. Roughnecks who bought homes at peak prices are walking away from mortgages they can no longer afford. Local school districts are losing students as families flee to find work elsewhere. Mobile home parks that house temporary workers sit empty, and retail businesses that thrived during the boom are shuttering permanently. Real estate agents report homes listed for months without a single showing. The few buyers remaining are offering cash at 60 to 70% of asking prices, knowing desperate sellers have few alternatives. The coastal regions aren't faring much better, as insurance crises and industrial decline create their own perfect storms. Corpus Christi's sparkling bay views and coastal lifestyle once attracted families seeking affordable waterfront living, but the sparkling city by the sea is now drowning in a perfect storm of economic pressures. Corpus Christi faces the possibility of experiencing a decline in home prices over the next year, as multiple industries that anchor the local economy simultaneously contract. The petrochemical corridor that stretches along the coast is shedding jobs at an alarming rate. Major refineries have announced permanent closures, while chemical plants are scaling back operations as global demand weakens. When Flint Hills Resources shuttered its refinery, it wasn't just the 800 direct jobs that disappeared. It was the ripple effect through contractors, suppliers, and local businesses that supported those workers. Hurricane insurance costs have reached crisis levels. Homeowners near the water now face annual premiums exceeding $12,000, making coastal properties unaffordable even for middle-class families. Many insurers have simply stopped writing new policies in hurricane-prone areas, leaving existing homeowners trapped with properties they can't sell. The tourism sector, already weakened by recent storm damage, continues struggling with reduced visitor numbers. Hotels report occupancy rates down 30% from pre-pandemic levels, while restaurants and entertainment venues close permanently as tourist dollars dry up. Families who moved here for refinery jobs are discovering their homes have become financial anchors. Military personnel from Naval Air Station Corpus Christi face the brutal choice of selling at massive losses or carrying underwater mortgages when reassigned. Even smaller college towns are not immune to the correction, as changing demographics and enrollment patterns create their own housing market challenges. Huntsville seemed insulated from Texas's broader housing troubles, anchored by Sam Houston State University and the state's prison system. But this East Texas college town is discovering that stability can quickly turn into stagnation. Huntsville faces the possibility of experiencing a decline in home prices over the next year, as multiple pillars of its economy weaken simultaneously. The university's enrollment has dropped significantly as students increasingly choose community colleges or skip higher education altogether due to rising costs. When fewer students need housing, the oversupply of student-oriented apartments and rental homes becomes glaringly obvious. Property investors who bought near campus expecting steady rental income are now competing for a shrinking pool of tenants. The prison industry, Huntsville's other major employer, is undergoing massive restructuring. Budget cuts and criminal justice reforms have reduced the need for correctional officers and support staff. The Walls Unit and other facilities that once provided stable, well-paying jobs are operating with skeleton crews, leaving hundreds of families searching for alternative employment in a town with limited options. Demographic shifts compound the problem. Young graduates leave immediately after college, while older residents age in place without selling their homes. This creates a housing market where supply grows but demand shrinks, particularly for starter homes that college-educated young adults would typically purchase. Local real estate agents report homes sitting on the market for 4 to 6 months, with many sellers reducing prices multiple times before finding buyers. Faculty members nearing retirement are discovering their homes are worth far less than expected. Rural areas are experiencing their own unique challenges as agricultural pressures and population exodus create different but equally severe market disruptions. Sulphur Springs represents the forgotten face of Texas's housing crisis, where small-town America collides with the economic forces beyond local control. Sulphur Springs faces the possibility of experiencing a decline in home prices over the next year. But in rural East Texas, decline often means something far more permanent than temporary market corrections. The agricultural economy that sustained this community for generations is withering under pressure from corporate farming, climate challenges, and global commodity price swings. Family farms that employed local workers are being sold to agribusiness giants who operate with minimal local staff. When the dairy cooperative closed last year, it eliminated 200 jobs in a town of 16,000 people. Young adults flee to Dallas or Houston immediately after high school, leaving behind aging parents and empty houses that nobody wants to buy. Who's going to purchase a 3-bedroom ranch home in rural Hopkins County when there are no jobs, limited internet connectivity, and the nearest hospital is 30 miles away? Infrastructure decay accelerates the decline. Water systems built in the 1960s need expensive upgrades the shrinking tax base can't afford. Main Street businesses close permanently as online shopping and long commutes to larger cities drain local spending. The human stories are heartbreaking. Elderly farmers can't sell properties their families have owned for decades. Young couples who stay face impossible choices: accept poverty-level wages locally or uproot their children for opportunities elsewhere. The statewide factors driving these local crashes paint an alarming picture of systemic problems that extend far beyond individual cities or regions. The individual city crashes we've examined aren't isolated incidents. They're symptoms of massive statewide forces that are reshaping Texas real estate permanently. Listings just hit 123,000 in April 2025, 53% higher than normal, creating an oversupply crisis that dwarfs anything Texas has experienced since the 1980s oil bust. The migration boom that fueled Texas's housing frenzy has collapsed dramatically. In 2022, net domestic migration brought 292,100 new residents to the state. However, by 2024, that number fell to 85,200, a 62% decline. California refugees who once drove bidding wars are staying put, while corporate relocations have slowed to a trickle as companies reassess expansion plans. Mortgage rates hovering above 6.5% have priced out millions of potential buyers who could afford homes when rates were near 3%. A monthly payment that was $1,800 in 2021 now costs over $2,800 for the same house. That's not just expensive, it's economically devastating for middle-class families. The insurance crisis compounds every problem. Property insurance premiums have doubled or tripled across Texas, making home ownership unaffordable even when mortgage payments seem manageable. Some areas can't get coverage at any price, creating entire neighborhoods where traditional financing is impossible. Meanwhile, builders continue completing projects started during the boom, flooding markets already drowning in inventory. The disconnect between supply and demand has reached levels that historically precede major corrections. With all these warning signs flashing red, the question becomes timing. How deep will this correction go, and how long will it last? The depth and duration of Texas's housing correction will depend largely on factors beyond the state's control, but early indicators suggest this isn't a quick market hiccup. Real estate analyst Nick Gurley predicts that Texas home prices could drop an additional 4% statewide over the next year, but that may be optimistic if broader economic pressures intensify. The most alarming scenario involves the energy sector. Gurley warns he could see a 15 to 20% correction in the cards, especially if there is a recession in the oil industry. With oil prices already pressuring Houston, Dallas, and smaller energy-dependent communities, this isn't a distant possibility. It's a looming threat that could materialize within months. Even the baseline projection paints a challenging picture. Affordability challenges are expected to persist throughout 2025, and it is still likely that Texas's market will be about 10 to 12% overvalued at the end of 2025, with further gradual declines extending into 2026. For homeowners, this timeline means years of financial stress. Families who bought at peak prices face the prospect of being underwater on their mortgages well into the next decade. First-time buyers may find opportunities, but only if they can secure financing in an increasingly restrictive lending environment. The recovery timeline remains uncertain because it depends on factors Texas can't control: federal interest rates, national economic conditions, and global energy markets. Unlike previous corrections that rebounded quickly, this one appears structural rather than cyclical, suggesting a fundamentally different Texas housing market may emerge on the other side.